Hey everybody, this is Minion Soldier, and with this video, I kind of wanted to touch a bit up on the mouse versus keyboard debate, or not the mouse versus keyboard debate, the mouse and keyboard versus joystick slash HOTAS slash game controller debate, but mostly it's mouse versus joystick, mouse versus HOTAS. Now, a lot of people, when you bring this subject up, they're immediately the shields just go up, and they're just no. I use mouse and keyboard, or I use HOTAS, and it's the best, and it's the optimal way, and I use a HOTAS because it's more flight sim, and yada yada yada, and I want immersion. And I think that HOTAS should be the best, and then there's other people who I've played War Thunder, and that's how I learned, and it's obviously the optimal thing with weapon gimbals and Star Citizen, so that's what everybody else should be using anyway. Forget immersion, blah 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 blah. And then immersion always kind of weighs in on this a little bit. And it's kind of funny how sometimes immersion is just so it has to be immersive. No, that would break immersion. You can't fly your ship from an outside view. You have to fly it from an internal view if you want all the HUD updates and all that, because otherwise it breaks immersion. But as far as me using a mouse and not breaking immersion, no, that doesn't break immersion at all. And there's all kinds of layers to this debate and to these immersion debates. But in effect, how will this really play out? Well, is mouse and keyboard gonna get nerfed? No, it's not going to happen. It is never going to happen. There are way too many people playing with mouse and keyboard and used to weapon gimbals. So mouse and keyboard is pretty much probably going to stay exactly the way it is now. I don't really see them making any huge nerf to mouse and keyboard, because they're going to look at it and say, you know what? Well, obviously we got to buff joysticks. I mean, we got a Star Citizen HOTAS coming out, and you can't really market, say, $100 to $150 HOTAS and say, oh, by the way, here's a $150 control device control scheme, whatever you want, and it's the second best control scheme in the game. Have fun. You can't really market it like that. So what are they going to have to do? They're going to have to buff joysticks. And what does that mean? Well, we're going to go back to that area that we were in 0.8, 0.7, 0.9, when gimbaled weapons for a joystick user just meant that the guns just, boom, locked right on to the enemy ship. If you were reasonably close, the guns just locked right on. Now, I mean, here I'm not using that version of the game, but it's just, that's what it's going to turn into. Now, being able to use a joystick like this against Vanduul is not that hard. Using it against other players is a lot more difficult, and that's the real measure there. And so they're going to have it so your gimbals just snap right back on the target, just like it was earlier in the the pre-alpha. And we're going to end up going back to that, because that's going to be probably the choice of how to balance the game, because you can't really market a HOTAS and say, oh, by the way, it's the most difficult control scheme in the game, and it's $150, and you'll always be second string to somebody who bought a $15 mouse and a $5 keyboard from Dell. Right? I mean, it doesn't make any sense, so you're going to have to buff it, especially if you're marketing a HOTAS. So for mouse and keyboard users right now, these are the days of glory, but moving forward, I have a feeling that it's actually going to flip the other way. And it's going to be like mouse and keyboard are okay, they're good, but really you want a HOTAS, because they're going to want to sell people on immersion, and they're going to want to sell people on the Star Citizen HOTAS. I mean, it makes sense. I mean, you wouldn't go to all the effort of going to a company and trying to get a peripheral either made specifically for, or another peripheral kind of repackaged towards your game, towards a game that hasn't even been released yet. A game that's still in, I mean, they say alpha, but technically we're still in pre-alpha, because, this isn't a full-featured game. We're not testing all the features yet, so we're still pre-alpha. Come on. When you have another company doing that, and you're trying to market that product and sell that product, and not only sell that product to the consumer, but you're trying to sell the idea to the manufacturer, You're not going to say, oh yeah, it's going to be the second best control scheme in the game. So there's going to be a lot of people who are going to be out there who want to spend to $150 on a on a device that's going to be the second best control scheme in the game. No, it doesn't make sense. So what you're going to end up seeing is you're going to see joysticks getting a buff, and it's going to be back to that time when all you had to do was get them reasonably to within the center, and the guns just snapped right on them, and that was it. Boom, you just pull the trigger. As long as the transverse velocity wasn't too high and you weren't tracking just a little bit behind, you're just going to end up just knocking guys out of the sky with the HOTAS. And I mean, is that an unreasonable point of view to take? Is that an unreasonable expectation for how the game is going to turn out? I don't really think that it is. I mean, I think that that's a fairly measured assessment of what's going to happen. I mean, joysticks are going to get buffed. HOTASs are going to get buffed. And it's going to be really before we actually have a full-featured game to where we can really truthfully evaluate those control schemes versus one another. I think the snap judgment is going to be before we get to that point where mouse and keyboard are simply declared altogether best. We're going to be kind of buffing one against the other before we have all the facts. And so, to a certain extent, as a joystick user, I'm kind of thinking, well, you know what? I have a feeling things are going to be looking up for joystick users, but at the same time, I'm a bit more of a balanced person, so I'm kind of thinking like, oh man, what's this going to mean for all those mouse and keyboard users? Because, there's a lot of people who are playing with mouse and keyboard, and you really just can't ignore the majority, and you can't really just step on them. So in other words, to keep mouse and keyboard users happy, they're probably going to keep the mouse and keyboard control scheme pretty much the way it is going forward. They're not going to say debuff gimbals so that gimbals are slower to track or it's tougher to get the gimbals on the target. They're not, but what they're going to use probably as a balance point is how quickly can a joystick user's gimbals snap onto a target versus a mouse user being able to just basically put the pixels or put the pixels on the other pixels and click. And to sit there and just be kind of derogatory about it and say, oh well, mouse and keyboard users are just clicking on a target on the screen, it's not that challenging. There is a certain amount of skill that goes into using mouse and keyboard and navigating the ship around that. And it's going to be a lot more difficult for them to efficiently navigate their vessel, but the problem is that really in the end it's weapons that define how the battle is going. And of course, if you have a mouse and keyboard user who can just snap onto targets, boom, 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 and all he has to do is decouple and just turn his ship into a one-man flying turret, that's not exactly balanced either. So I have a feeling that it's going to be going forward. It's going to be mouse and keyboard are going to be pretty much the way they are. And the balance point is going to be how quickly a joystick user's gimbals will snap onto that target. And that's going to define it, because I think joystick users will probably end up with a bit of a maneuvering advantage, but they're still going to need a bit more help in the gun area before you start to see joysticks becoming overpowered. If they were to just say snap right on the target, boom, like that, and they just blow a guy out of the sky without any effort at all. But it will kind of turn into a situation like this, where if you've been practicing with joystick a lot and you're getting pretty damn good with it, something like that might make a small minority of pilots who are using joysticks a little bit on the OP side. So I think it's always going to be an evolving thing, but I really think that in the near future we're going to start seeing joysticks start snapping onto targets a lot quicker, and their gimbals are going to be a lot more self-directed. And so overall, I'm not negative about the future of Star Citizen mouse versus keyboard. Mouse versus keyboard. Mouse versus joystick or mouse versus HOTAS. I'm not negative on it. I think that in general it's always going to be a work in progress from the day the game launches until the day the game closes. Who knows? But I really think that for joystick users, I know that there's a lot of people who are kind of like really enraged by this and da 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 da. But I have a feeling that sooner or later CIG is going to kind of sit down and they're just kind of waiting for the right opportunity to kind of drop this particular pebble in the pond and see what the ripples are like. You know, they're just kind of testing out the waters before they go right ahead and just say, "Oh, guess what? Joysticks are getting a big buff." Boom. So I guess we just gotta wait and see. But just kind of remember that there's a lot of people that play out there with mouse and keyboard. So even though you might have some very strong feelings towards the mouse and keyboard users, you have to remember that those people are probably going to be the vast majority of the people playing this game. And so there's always going to be a certain sense within CIG that they have to be catered to a certain degree. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed the video and enjoyed listening to me ramble on. And I might sneak out a second video, but it'll still be talking about Star Citizen, but it won't be Star Citizen footage, so to speak. It'll be a little something different because I got a little occupied over the weekend. Anyways, hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching.